Okay, so we're recording, and just so you know, we're only really getting the very middle of the room is being captured. Okay? So if you're sitting at either of these two tables, you are on camera now, but everybody at the edge of the room, you basically can do anything that you want, because you're not being filmed. You can act like you would in any other classroom. Okay. We're going to play a game where you're going to choose your own objective. So I'm not going to give you an objective. All I'm going to say is that there is somebody in the room who is willing to pay money for shapes. If you look on the edges of the classroom, you'll see a diagram of some different shapes, and you'll also see a price list. Okay? What this means is that if you have a rectangle, then she's willing to pay 300 euros for a rectangle. Can you see all that money on the table? That's how much money she's got to spend. If you give her a rectangle, then she'll give you 300 euros. The conditions, though, are that the rectangle needs to be cut from paper with a very clean edge. If it looks as though it's been torn, you're going to reject it. It has to be cut with a clean edge, i.e., it needs to be made with scissors. Also, on the price list, it has some dimensions. It says 13 centimetres by 7 centimetres. If you try and sell a rectangle that's 13.1 centimetres, then she won't pay for it. So she's going to measure everything to the nearest millimetre, and it must be 100% accurate. Now, I'm going to do this game slightly differently to how I promised the other students I would, and that's mainly because I've been speaking to our facilities and our health and safety officer, and I was told that I cannot do what I was planning on doing for fears of injury and you guys ending up suing the school. So I'm going to do it slightly differently, and I want everybody to have a sheet of paper, because you're not going to be able to make any shapes unless you've got something to make them on. So I want all of you to have a sheet of paper. You're not allowed to get any paper out of your bags. Actually, you're not allowed to get anything out of your bags. You're allowed to use the paper that I give you, anything else that I give you, but only materials that you get from me as part of the game. Does everybody have a sheet of paper? No? Okay. We're simulating an economy here, so you're all individuals. You're all individuals in this society that we have. I want it to be a fair society, so I've given everybody a sheet of paper. But, you know, life isn't all that fair, so I'm going to give a few of you an extra sheet of paper, just because I've got a few more. Okay? And in the debrief, we'll talk a little bit about how realistic this simulation is, and how I could have changed it slightly differently. You can have one. You can have one extra. There's one extra there. Okay. I think it's helpful to have some pencils. Okay. So it's very difficult to draw any shapes without having a pencil. So I'm going to give you. You can have a pencil. You can have a pencil. Some of you are finding out that you're going to be born with pencils. I mean, you know, that's realistic, right? Some of us in life get born with a silver spoon, some of us get born with a sharp pencil, some of us don't. So take a pencil. Oh, sorry. Some people get born with rich parents. Right? Some don't. So I'm just going to distribute these fairly evenly. We get some dollars. Anybody not getting up with the pencil? Now, are you ready to get going? You probably need a few other things as well. I'll give you a heads up. Do you know what? So I'm going to give you 45 minutes, okay? Anybody comes up to the table, if they've got a shape that's got nice neat edges and doesn't have any tears in it, and if it's the exact measurements on the piece of paper that you've got in front of you, you're going to pay them cash from that pile there. Okay? There's some other stuff in this box. Off you go. You've got 45 minutes.
Stop. Get the stop. Compass.
You can use those templates, but I'll be careful because they're not to scale. It's up to you. It's up to you. You have to work that out. Guys, I think it's a simple statement of fact that you are all an individual. You are all an individual. It's completely up to you who, if anyone, you wish to work with and what your collective intent is. Okay, can I have everybody's attention now, please? Right, we have some debriefing to do, so like everyone's attention, it shouldn't take us too long. Now, it's going to be somewhat interesting because I'm going to be telling you how I've been doing the game with other groups as well as debriefing what we've done. But hopefully you found that relatively enjoyable, and I think there was sufficient learning outcomes to mean that I'm glad that I did my little tweak. I'm going to ask you how much you will earn. When I've done this in the past, I've put people in specific groups. The aim this time was that it was going to be a lot more fluid. The fact that you all kind of all came in and sit at tables implies that you did, I think, naturally just make a group with the people at your table. But you had a little bit more flexibility. So let me just find out, did you all work together?
Yes.
Okay, and how much did you earn?
20,000.
No, 6,000.
Okay, you could take all of your fights outside after class, then you can sort it all out in the car park. Okay, what you're going to get from me, either tonight or over the weekend, is I'm going to send out the information about what happened in all of the other seminar groups. The main difference is, other seminar groups, there were 6 tables, each table was a separate country, and each country was given its own envelope with its own resources in. With you guys, I wanted to do it differently, and so I made sure that the paper was as fairly distributed as possible at the start, and then for the other resources, I pretty much gave it a free-for-all, and it just allowed you just to have a bit of anarchy. Those of you that did well, so it's, even though you had more of you, you still did very well individually. What was the secret to your success?
There are 6.
He's asking you.
Per person they did well. What was your secret?
Specialization.
Okay, and how did you specialize?
Actual chemistry, coordination.
So we had sales, we had like the sales crew, they went up and sold the items. We would be drawing and these two would be cutting and like doing the fine.
Okay, so one thing that we're seeing in this exercise is specialization is important.
Division of labor.
Some people are good at drawing templates, some people are good at cutting, some people are rubbish at everything, and so you just send them to just walk to the front and back and pick up the money. It's not useful. Those of you who didn't do so well, what were some of the reasons for that? What were the difficulties that people faced?
I just didn't get started because I had like 2 papers and I didn't have any material, so it was hard to like offer something in the beginning.
Okay, so your difficulty was that you weren't in a group to start off with. You weren't in a country, you weren't in a unit, a collective unit to begin with. Okay, so you started from the anarchy that we started off with, and ultimately in the beginning, the initial resource allocation was a bit of a lottery. And so you didn't benefit for whatever reason from the fact that other people got to the materials first. What were the important materials?
Scissors.
Scissors. You can't make any money if it's not for the scissors. You need the scissors to be able to get the shapes. Who started off with the scissors? Who got some scissors to start off with? So this group had 2 pairs of scissors and you had 2 pairs of scissors.
Yeah.
Where did the scissors end up? Okay. So how did you get hold of the scissors?
They
You stole them?
Yeah, literally. They just took it. They just took it.
That was not me, I swear.
You stole them?
They stole the scissors. They should go to jail.
Okay, now were they your scissors?
Yeah, well, our sisters,
Who says they were your scissors?
We took it from the box, so it's...
You're saying first finders keepers?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, we'll come back to this with a debrief. The scissors are important. How many of you traded scissors?
No.
I mean, Eric's tried, but we were...
So when I look back at the other groups, some groups managed to make a large amount of wealth collectively. Obviously there's disparities within the groups, but the main difference was the use of scissors. So there were some groups where a group would have the scissors, and then they'd draw some shapes, and then when they were ready to cut out, they'd start cutting things out. Meanwhile, another group that didn't have scissors would find it a big struggle. The groups that were successful realised that it's a waste of resources to keep scissors not doing anything. And so the groups that have the scissors would rent them out to the other groups, maybe for a minute at a time. Okay? In those economies, the scissors are constantly being used, and you're not only benefiting from selling final goods, you're also making a profit from simply renting out equipment. So that's one way in which, if you don't start off with scissors, you don't have to steal them, you don't even have to buy them, you need to find a way of possibly renting them. What were some other important resources?
Paper.
Well, okay, paper was a key. Paper was a key. Paper was a key raw material. Right? You can't make anything without paper. How much was a piece of paper worth? We had 2 people that were hoarding paper, right? So you were hoping that there would be a paper shortage and then you'd swoop in with all of the paper. What was the value of a sheet of paper in the game? 100?
Yeah.
So I didn't notice much trading amongst you guys, so I didn't establish what the price in this room is of paper. You gave them 250, okay? So you pay 250 for a piece of paper, is that high or low?
That's high. You have to treat the paper, you have to do something to it quite a lot.
You do have to make money out of it. The value of the paper, how much is she willing to pay for paper? 0. So the paper has no intrinsic value. The value comes, it's a derived value from what you turn it into. Now, what should you turn it into?
Shapes.
What kind of shapes?
Probably circles, but...
Circles?
No.
Now what I'm going to do is, I gave you 45 minutes because for the average bachelor student it takes 45 minutes to go through the thought process of, first of all, circle, 500 euros. Ka-ching, let's make circles. And then maybe it's like another 5-10 minutes before somebody in the group goes, do you know what? We can only make 2 circles per piece of paper. There's an awful lot of wasted paper if we make circles, right? So what do you make?
Rectangles.
What was the most common thing that you bought?
Rectangles.
Rectangles. So you realise that even though rectangles are worth less, they have less wasted paper, you can make more per sheet, and they're relatively easier to make, so you will start making rectangles until somebody recognises that even then you're wasting a lot of paper. What's the most valuable shape? How many groups said, whoa, before we start cutting into the paper, let's work out what we should be making?
Yeah, but rectangles are quicker to make, so you can use you can make the triangles when you add little scraps of paper that.
Yeah, at the end, you
Run
can
out
use the
paper.
scraps of paper at the end for the equilateral triangles, and you can start with the rectangle.
Because rectangles just.
But then you're using valuable paper to make.
Yeah, but we had some
time-wise.
left over as well. Time-wise, it was fine.
It's better. It's better.
Because when the rectangles were not perfect,
Yeah.
we could cut them.
Okay, so that's a valid point, is if you're not 100% confident in your quality, if you're slow to make rectangles, and if you're not confident that you're going to make them well, then you can start with a rectangle and then if it's rubbish you can reuse it. But if your quality process is good, right? In other words, if you can draw a triangle, which to be honest isn't like a massive
It doesn't
expectation.
take twice as long to make a rectangle as it does to make an equilateral triangle.
Well, it says the team with 6 people in it, right? You complain that you didn't have enough time or manpower.
We did.
So, as far as I can tell, the best shape to make is an equilateral triangle. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you make 21 equilateral triangles, you'll make €3,150. If you fill a paper with rectangles, you can make €1,800. So there's quite a big difference if you can be bothered to
Yeah, but how many of these are not going to get sold because you just messed them up?
Yeah, you'll mess up a lot of those. The
Yeah.
ones next to
me.
not
You see my
Not you.
So this is where it comes to specialisation. What happened to the quality of the shapes as the game went on?
They got way better.
Right, it got better. Especially you guys came up with the specialisation, right? I guarantee if you do this a few times, you get very good. This is how you make the most money in the game. You do the equilateral triangles. Okay. In terms of the lecture that I did a couple of days ago, what do you need to generate growth?
Efficiency.
Right, I didn't say that then. You're right, you do need some efficiency. What are the foundations for growth? What do you need to be in place? Think of the iPhone analogy. What's the basics?
Institutions.
We'll come on to institutions. Resources, right? So you need resources. Some of you happen to get good resources to begin with. I'll show you the results from the other groups because the other groups I made sure that there was very big disparities in resources. Because I gave each group their own envelope, I ensured that some groups got lots of money, the compass, the protractor, all of the scissors, pencils. There was one group that didn't get as much high quality technical equipment, but they did get a bit more paper. And there was 2 groups that got basically nothing at all. A few €200, a couple of bits of paper and a pencil. So the way that we've been doing this game previously is there is a country that we can think of as being high tech, because it can do all of these things that it has all of the equipment to make the final product. There are countries that are rich in raw materials, and there are countries that basically have nothing. Okay? Now, if natural resources determine growth, we would expect that the countries that start off with the same resources should generate the same amount of income at the end. And what we see, and what I'll show you when I send this out, is that that's not actually the case. The countries that have the best resources have an advantage, but in many cases, the countries with the worst resources end up with more income than the countries that started off with the good resources. One reason for that is that the countries that start off with the compass will look at that €500 and start making circles because they have the skill and they have the profit sign of the €500. The countries that don't have much resources will perhaps need to think a little bit more strategically, because not only do you need resources, what else do you need? You've got your hardware. What else?
Ideas.
Ideas, right? The software. So in our context, the ideas is basically this design, this template. Right, these are the ideas. This is how a country that doesn't have rich natural resources can leapfrog the countries that do, because you also need to know how to use the materials. How many of you use the protractor? I'm looking at you because there's a protractor in front of you.
Okay.
Right? So if you're trying to make the equilateral triangles, you can do it with the ruler, but it's a little bit dodgy, and I think that's why a lot of them get rejected. Because to make a perfect equilateral triangle, you need a compass, or ideally the protractor. So the ideas here is that actually, yes, the scissors are important, but if you can get hold of a protractor, you can do this. And this isn't valuable in itself, because you're not going to pay for this, are you? But what can you do if you have this, but no scissors?
You can
Sell this.
Yeah.
Sell this. So this is another nice learning insight, which is that we tend to think that the only chance we have of making money is by selling to the final consumer a final good. In the global economy, that's not how it works though. There aren't all countries creating consumer goods. So think about China, for example. China imports raw materials, turns it into the next stage of production, and then ships them out to another country where the finishing touches are put on. In some cases, if it's a tractor, the only thing that's added is a sign that says Made in America, for example. Right? But there is another level of production that takes place externally. And so this is something that you guys, those of you that started off, like you for example, that didn't have the compass, didn't have the scissors, can't make the actual shapes, you need to go further down the production line and say, well, I can make something that is valuable. I can take a piece of paper and I can turn it into a template which is added value. Okay, hardware, the natural resources. We've got the software and the ideas. And what's the third component?
Skilled workers.
Okay, so the skill, the labour quality is probably a resource in terms of manpower. Ideas are probably the technical know-how. Institutions. Okay, now this is what I was doing as my big experiment with you guys. Because all of the other groups, I tried to give them the institutions of a market economy. Can anybody remember what the 4 examples of what I considered to be good economic policy, in other words, economic institutions that are conducive to growth? What were the 4 things that I listed in the presentation?
What do you mean?
Anyone? There was a green box.
Capital.
Capital is important. Capital is your hardware.
Legal framework.
Legal framework. Okay. So we need reliable legal institutions. Did you have reliable legal institutions? What were your legal institutions? Did any of you have any agreements?
No.
Did any of you make any agreements with each other?
Yes.
Did you renege on any agreements? Did anyone violate any agreements?
Yes.
And try and sue anybody? So this is where, in this environment, there was quite a lot of trust. So those of you that did engage in some kind of a trade, low trust, there wasn't a lot of trading taking place. So the way in which you resolve low trust is through a contract, right? Where you say, we'll give you this if you do X or Y. Now imagine that you are a country and you're trying to engage in trade and you don't have reliable legal frameworks, then this is going to be very difficult to create wealth. Legal framework, I'll come on to property rights. I also mentioned a stable monetary system. I did give you a stable monetary system. You knew how much all of these items, all of these shapes were going to be worth. In some countries around the world that don't have stable monetary systems, people can only exchange through barter. As the game progressed and more money entered the system, most of the trades that you did with each other turned into monetary trades. So to start off with, you were swapping goods for other goods, but by the end, you were swapping everything for money. And hopefully you saw how it makes life easier if you have money. It makes things very difficult, though, if you have money, and the people that are controlling the money create some kind of hyperinflation, and there are countries that have hyperinflations, which is not conducive to growth. So we need a stable monetary system, reliable legal system. I said free trade before. I allowed free trade. I didn't say to you, if you're going to swap scissors with somebody else, you have to give me something. So there was no tariffs, no trade barriers whatsoever. So you had a complete free trade environment. But the one thing I did change was private property rights. So with the other groups, I said, these resources belong to this team, this country. So there was one situation where somebody immediately saw that a group had scissors and went and said, can I have these? And that group said, no, these are ours. They were very confident in their claim that these scissors belonged to them. With you guys, I didn't say, these are your resources, these are your resources. I handed out the paper and then I just left everything else in the middle for you to fight over them. And interestingly, I heard quite a few people say, who owns the scissors? Okay? There wasn't originally ownership of the scissors, so people didn't know who they needed to talk to be able to use the scissors. By the end, people kind of managed to either steal them and just take hold of them. But we'll see, when I show you how much wealth you created relative to the groups, we'll see whether or not the starting position of property rights is helpful. What I found interesting though is that you actually developed a property rights system. Because even though there was one example of a theft, you all seem to be pretty confident about who owned what by the end of the game. It was almost as if you developed your own property rights system. What I was expecting to happen with you guys was a very happy, peaceful, communist utopia. What should have happened, right now, you look exactly like the other groups did. You're all sitting in teams, you've collectively come up with an agreement on how you're going to work together, and you've all been working very hard to make lots of money. What I was expecting you guys to do, because I didn't start off with private property rights, what I was expecting you to do was to all sit around together. Maybe one of you would get a guitar out and start singing some nice music. But then one of you would say, hey guys, what shapes should we make here? Okay, let's all pull together all of our collective resources that the teacher has given us, and let's collectively work out what we should be doing. You might say, look, we've got 4 scissors, so let's have 4 of us in charge of the cutting. We've got loads of pencils. Somebody can be in charge of making templates of equilateral triangles, somebody can make all the squares, then they get all cut, and then at the end of the game, we will all equally share the wealth. That's what I was expecting. But my experiment to kind of see whether or not communism creates as much wealth as capitalism failed, because I set you up with the communist system, but you decided somehow, without even talking about it, just to create a capitalist society anyway.
Yeah, capitalists, you guys.
Sorry?
Capitalists.
Evidently. Now, having said that, you did still have a profit motive. So it wasn't really a kind of simulation of a communist system, because you still had, let's say you're the USSR, you still had the American consumer who is buying things and giving you a profit motive to produce particular items. If I was really trying to make it a communist simulation, what I really should do is say it's up to you what you make. That would be very interesting, because if I said to you, just make some shapes, and I didn't give you any guidance, didn't give you any prices, didn't give you a final consumer, and then we actually looked at the value of what you'd done, what do you think the difference would be? Do you think you'd have more shapes or less shapes? Do you think you'd have more valuable shapes or less valuable shapes?
Be way less productive.
I think so. I think that goes without saying. Yeah.
I was just saying for the communist system,
Yeah.
I think it's also about the disposition, because we were like disposed in groups. So maybe if we were disposed in a large group, we would have done what you said.
Yeah. No. In hindsight, when I came back into the room at 2:45 and I saw everybody just start sitting at desks in a team, I thought, oh damn, this is not going to be quite as effective as if I'd have taken the time to remove all of the tables and just had everybody sitting in a circle. You're right, so the architecture of the experiment is going to impact what's happening. The main difference though was that the other groups, they had a team name, I told them which team they were in, and with you guys, even though you did kind of sit in similar places, you were completely free to kind of decide whether or not you were working as a team or not. Any other questions or comments about the game? The main purpose of the exercise was firstly to just hopefully it's enjoyable, but secondly it's to think back to some of those institutions. Think about the institutions that were at play in the simulation, how they tie into the lecture that I gave, whether you can imagine tweaking those institutions with increased wealth or reduced wealth creation, and hopefully you can kind of see those links to that.